Chapter 2. Lildarin of Wildander was 18 years old. Although his ingenuous nature made him seem more boyish, no emotion touched that did not instantly register in his expression, and sincerity shone in his face like a beacon. He was impulsive, extravagant in his declarations, and probably, Garion reluctantly concluded, not overly bright. It was impossible not to like him, however. The following morning, when Garion pulled on his cloak to go out and continue his watch for Heta, Lildarin immediately joined him. The young Erin had changed out of his garish clothing and now wore brown house, green tunic, and a dark brown wool cape. He carried his bow and wore a quiver of arrows at his belt. As they walked through the snow toward the broken west wall, he amused himself by losing arrows at targets only half visible ahead of him. "You're awfully good," Garion said admiringly, after a particularly fine shot. "I'm an Austrian," Lildarin replied modestly. "We've been bowmen for thousands of years. My father has the limbs of his bow cut on the day I was born, and I could draw it back by the time I was 8. "I imagine you hunt a great deal," Garion said, thinking of the dense forest all around them and the tracks of game he had seen in the snow. "It's our most common pastime." Lildarin stopped to pull the arrow he had just shot from the tree trunk. "My father prides himself on the fact that beef or mutton are never served at his table. I went hunting once in Jacki." "Deer?" Lildarin asked. "No, wild boars. We didn't use bows, though. The Cherriks hunt with spears." "Spears? How can you get close enough to kill anything with a spear?" Garion laughed a bit ruefully, remembering his bruised ribs and aching head. "Getting close isn't the problem. It's getting away after you've speared him that's the difficult part." Lildarin didn't seem to grasp that. "The huntsmen form a line," Garion explained, "and they crash through the woods, making as much noise as they can. They take your spear and wait where the boars are likely to pass when they try to get away from the noise. Being chased makes them bad-tempered, and when they see you, they charge. That's when you spear them." "Isn't that dangerous?" Lildarin's eyes were wide. Garion nodded. "I almost got all my ribs broken." It was not exactly boasting, but he admitted to himself that he was pleased by Lildarin's reaction to his story. "We don't have many dangerous animals in Asturia," Lildarin said almost wistfully. "A few bears, and once in a while a pack of wolves." He seemed to hesitate for a moment, looking closely at Garion. "Some men, though, find more interesting things to shoot at than wild stags." He said it with a kind of secretive sidelong glance. "Oh?" Garion was not sure what he meant. Hardly a day goes by that same membrane horse doesn't come home rideless. Garion was shocked at that. "Some men think that there are too many membranes in Asturia," Lildarin explained with heavy emphasis. "I thought that the Ariandish civil war was over." "There are many who don't believe that. There are many who believe that the war will continue until Austria is free of the membrane crowd." Lildarin's tone left no question as to where he stood in the matter. "Wasn't the country unified after the Battle of Vaux-Membre?" Garion objected. "Unified? How could anyone believe that? Asturia is created like a subject province. The king's court is at Vaux-Membre. Every governor, every tax collector, every bailiff, every high sheriff in the kingdom is membrane. There's not a single Asturian in a position of authority anywhere in Erendia. The membrates even refuse to recognize our titles. My father, whose line extends back 1,000 years, is called landowner. A membrate would sooner bite out his tongue than call him baron." Lildarin's face had gone white with suppressed indignation. "I didn't know that. Garion said carefully, not sure how to handle the young man's feelings. Asturia's humiliation is almost at an end. However, Lildoran declared fervently, there are some men in Austria for whom patriotism is not dead, and the time is not far off when these men will hunt royal game. He emphasized his statement by snapping an arrow at a distant tree. They confirmed the worst of Garion's fears. Lildoran was a bit too familiar with the details not to be involved in this plot, as if he had realized himself that he had gone too far. Lildoran stared at Garion with consternation. I'm a fool, he blunted with a guilty look around him. I've never learnt to control my tongue. Please forget what I just said, Garion. I know you're my friend, and I know you won't betray what I said in a moment of heat. That was one thing Garion had feared. With that single statement, Lildoran had effectively sealed his lips. He knew that Mr. Wolfe would be warned that some wild scheme was afoot, but Lildoran's declaration of friendship and trust had made it impossible for him to speak. He wanted to grind his teeth with frustration as he stared full in the face of a major moral dilemma. They walked on, neither of them speaking and both a little embarrassed, until they reached the pit of the wall where Garion had waited in ambush the day before. For a time they stared out into the fog, their stained silence growing more uncomfortable by the moment. What's it like in Sendaria? Lildoran asked suddenly. I've never been there. There ain't so many trees, Garion answered, looking over the wall at the dark trunks marching off into the fog. It's an orderly kind of place. Where did you live there? At Valdem Farm. It's near Lake Errett. Is this Valdem a nobleman? Valda? Garion laughed. No, Valda's as common as old shoes. He's just a farmer, decent, honest, good-hearted. I miss him. A commoner, then. Lildoran said, seemingly ready to dismiss Valda as a man of no consequence. Rank doesn't mean very much in Sendaria, Garion told him, rather pointedly. What a man does is more important than what he is. He made a wry smile. I was a scullery boy. It's not very pleasant, but somebody's got to do it, I suppose. Not a serf, certainly. Lildoran sounded shocked. There aren't any serfs in Sendaria. No serfs. The young Aaron stared at him uncomprehensively. No, Garion said firmly. We never found it necessary to have serfs. Lildoran's expression clearly showed that he was baffled by the notion. Garion remembered the voices that had come to him out of the fog the day before, but he resisted the urge to say something about Sundorm. Lildoran would never understand, and the two of them were very close to friendship. Garion felt that he needed a friend just now, and he didn't want to spoil things by saying something that would offend this likable young man. What sort of work does your father do? Lildoran asked politely. He's dead. So's my mother, Garion found that if he said it quickly, it didn't hurt so much. Lildoran's eyes filled in sudden impulse sympathy. He put his hand consoledly on Garion's shoulder. I'm sorry, he said, his voice almost breaking. It must have been a terrible loss. I was a baby, Garion shrugged, trying to sound offhand about it. I don't even remember them. It was still too personal to talk about. Some pestilence? Lildoran asked gently. No, Garion answered in some flat tone. They were murdered. Lildoran gasped and his eyes went wild. A man crept into their village at night and set fire to the house, Garion continued emotionally. My grandfather tried to catch him, but he got away. From what I understand, the man is very old, enemy of my family. Surely you're not going to let it stand like that, Lildoran demanded. No, Garion replied, still looking out into the fog. As soon as I'm old enough, I'm going to find him and kill him. Good lad, Lildoran explained. suddenly catching Garion in a rough embrace. "We'll find him and cut him to pieces." "We?" "I'll be going with you, of course," Leldron declared. No true friend would do any less. It was obviously speaking on impulse, but just as obviously he was totally sincere. He gripped Garion's hand firmly. "I swear to you, Garion, I won't rest until the murderer of your parents lies dead at your feet." The sudden declaration was so totally predictable that Garion silently berated himself for not keeping his mouth shut. His feelings in the matter were very personal, and he was not really sure he wanted company in his search for his faceless enemy. Another part of him, however, rejoiced in Leldron's impulsiveness, but in Quishin's support. He decided to let the subject drop. He knew Leldron well enough by now to realize that the young man undoubtedly made dozens of devout promises a day, quickly offered in absolutely sincerity, and just as quickly forgotten. They talked then of other things, standing close together beside the sheltering wall that their dark cloaks drawn tightly about them. Shortly before noon, Garion heard the muffled sound of horses' hoofs somewhere out in the forest. A few minutes later, Hetar materialized out of the fog with a dozen wild-looking horses trailing after him. The tall Algo wore a short fleece-lined leather cape. His boots were mud-spattered, and his clothes travel-stained, but otherwise he seemed unaffected by his 2 weeks in the saddle. "Garion," he said gravely by way of greeting, and Garion and Leldron stepped out to meet him. "We've been waiting for you," Garion told him and introduced Leldron. "We'll show you where the others are." Atar nodded and followed the 2 young men through the ruins to the tower where Mr. Wolf and the others were waiting. "Snow in the mountains," the Algo remarked laconically by way of explanation as he swung down from his horse. "It delayed me a bit." He pulled his hood back from his shaved head and shook out his long black scarf lock. "No harm's been done," Mr. Wolf replied. "Come inside to the fire and have something to eat. We've got a lot to talk about." Atar looked at the horses, his tan, weathered face growing strangely blank, as if he were concentrating. The horses all looked back at him, their eyes alert, and their ears pointed sharply forward. Then they turned and picked their way off among the trees. "Won't they stray?" Dernick wanted to know. "No," Atar answered. "I asked them not to." Dernick looked puzzled, but he let it pass. They all went into the tower and sat near the fireplace. Aunt Pole cut dark bread and pale yellow cheese for them, while Dernick put more wood on the fire. "Chohang sent word to the clan chiefs," Atar reported, pulling off his cape. He wore a black long-sleeved horse-hide jacket with steel discs riveted to it to form a kind of flexible armor. "They've gathered at the stronghold for council." He unbelted the curd stev he wore, laid it out one side, and sat near the fire to eat. Wolf nodded. "Is anything trying to get through to Plugu?" "I sent a troop of my own into Gorham before I left," Hatar responded. "They'll get through if anyone can." "I hope so," Wolf stated. "The Gorham's an old friend of mine, and I'll need his help before all this is finished." "Aren't people afraid of the land of Algos?" Leldron inquired politely. "I've heard that there are monsters there that feed on the flesh of men." Hatar shrugged. "They stay in their lairs in the winter-time. Besides, they're seldom brave enough to attack a full troop of mounted men." He looked over at Mr. Wolf. "Southern Sadaria's crawling with Murgos. Or did you not know?" "I could have guessed," Wolf replied. Did they seem to be looking for anything in particular? I don't talk of Murgos, Atar said shortly. His hooked nose and fierce eyes made him look at the moment like a hawk before to swoop down to the kill. I'm surprised you weren't delayed even more, Silk battered. The whole world knows how you feel about Murgos. I indulged myself once, Atar admitted. I met 2 of them along the highway. It didn't take very long. 2 less to worry about then, Barak grunted with approval. I think it's time for some plain talk, Mr. Wolf said, brushing crumbs off the front of his tunic. Most of you have some notion of what we're doing, but I don't want anybody blundering into something by accident. We're after a man named Zadar. He used to be one of the Master's disciples. Then he went over to Torak. Early last fall, he somehow slipped into the throne room at Riva and stole the orb of Ulda. We're going to chase him down and get it back. Isn't he a sorcerer too? Barak asked, tugging absently at a thick red braid. That's not the term we use, Wolf replied, but yes, he does have a certain amount of that kind of power. We all did. Me, Beltera, and Belkira, Belzadar, all the rest of us. That's one of the things I wanted to warn you about. You all seem to have the same sort of name, Silk noticed. Our master changed our names when he took us as disciples. It was a simple change, but it meant a great deal to us. Wouldn't that mean that your original name was Gareth? Silk asked, his ferret eyes narrowing shrewdly. Mr. Wolf looked startled and then laughed. I haven't heard that name for thousands of years. I've been Belgarath for so long that I'd almost completely forgotten Gareth. It's probably just as well. Gareth was a troublesome boy, a thief and a liar, among other things. Some things never change, Aunt Paul observed. Nobody's perfect, Wolf admitted blandly. Why did Zadar steal the orb? Atar asked, sitting aside his plate. He's always wanted it for himself, the old man replied. That could be it, but more likely he's trying to take it to Torak. The one who delivers the orb to One Eye is going to be his favourite. But Torak's dead, Eldrin objected. The Riven warder killed him at Vomimbre. No, Wolf said. Torak isn't dead, only asleep. Bran's sword wasn't the one destined to kill him. Zadar carried him off after the battle and hid him someplace. Someday he'll awaken, probably someday fairly soon. If I'm reading the signs right, we've got to get the orb back before that happens. This Zadar's caused a lot of trouble, Barak rumbled. You should have dealt with him a long time ago, possibly, Wolf admitted. Why don't you just wave your hand and make him disappear? Barak suggested, making sort of a gesture with his thick fingers. Wolf shook his head. I can't. Not even the gods can do that. We've got some big problems then, Silk said with a frown. Every Murgo from here to Rat, Gosker's going to try to stop us from catching Zadar. Not necessarily, Wolf disagreed. Zadar's got the orb, but Kutukik commanded the Grolems. Kutukik? Veldrin asked. The Grolem high priest. He and Zadar hate each other. I think we can count on him to try to keep Zadar from getting to Torak with the orb. Barak shrugged. What difference does it make? You and Bulgara can use magic if we run into anything difficult, can't you? There are limitations on that sort of thing, Wolf said, a bit evasively. I don't understand, Barak said, frowning. Mr. Wolf took a deep breath. All right. As long as it's come up, let's go into that too. Sorcery, if that's what you want to call it. is a disruption of the natural order of things. Sometimes it has certain unexpected effects, so you have to be very difficult about what you do with it. Not only that, it makes, he frowned, let's call it a sort of noise. That's not exactly what it is, but it serves well enough to explain. Others with the same abilities can hear that noise. Once Belgara and I started changing things, every Grolem in the West is going to know exactly where we are and what we're doing. They'll keep pilling things in front of us until we're exhausted. It takes almost as much energy to do things that way that it does to do them with your arms and back, Aunt Pole explained. It's very tiring. She sat beside the fire, carefully mending a small tear in one of the Garian's tunics. I didn't know that, Barack admitted. Not many people do. If we have to, Pole and I can take certain steps, Wolf went on. But we can't keep it up forever, and we can't simply make things vanish. I'm sure you can see why. Oh, of course, Silk professed, though his tone indicated that he did not. Everything that exists depends on everything else, Aunt Pole explained quietly. If you were to unmake one thing, it's almost possible that everything would vanish. The fire popped, and Garion jumped slightly. The vaulted chamber seemed suddenly dark, and shadows lurked in the corners. What can't happen, of course, Wolf told them. When you try to unmake something, your will simply recoils on you, if you say, "Be not." Then you are the one who vanishes. That's why we're very careful about what we say. I can understand why, Silk said, his eyes widening slightly. Most of the things we'll encounter can be dealt with by ordinary means, Wolf continued. That's the reason we've brought you together. At least that's one of the reasons. Among you will be able to handle most of the things that get in our way. The important thing to remember is that Bulgara and I have to get to Zadar before we can reach Tarik with the orb. Zadar's found some way to torch the orb. I don't know how. If we can show Tarik how it's done, no power on earth will be able to stop one eye from becoming king and god over the whole world. They all sat in the ruddy flickering light of the fire, their faces serious as they considered that possibility. I think that pretty well covers everything, don't you, Pole? I believe so, Father, she replied, smoothing the front of her grey homespun gown. Later, outside the tower, as grey evening crept in among the foggy ruins of Verwagun, and the smell of the thick stew Aunt Pole was cooking for supper drifted out to them, Garion turned to Silk. Is it all really true? He asked. The small man looked out into the fog. Let's act as if we believed that it is, he suggested. Under the circumstances, I think it would be a bad idea to make a mistake. Are you afraid to, Silk? Garion asked. Silk sighed. Yes, he admitted. We can behave as if we believe that we aren't, can't we? I guess we can try, Garion said. And the two of them turned to go back into the chamber at the foot of the tower where the firelight danced on the low stone arcs, holding the fog and chill at bay.